I've always been fascinated by how a game with multiple endings can affect player behaviour, but also just how they work. In this episode of GDL Labs, I want to explore the variety of different endings in games and how they can affect player behaviour, but also to actually prototype them out in Unreal and see how in theory they are implemented. Of course, making one ending for a game is hard enough. You actually have to finish a game, which is a feat in and of itself. So when most games have multiple endings, they are usually either slight changes or just completely different cutscenes, which cap off the experience with polarizing tones. So first off, let's take a look at Bioshock.
No! 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 No!
Bioshock uses collectibles as a way to trigger either a good ending or a bad ending. If you save all the little sisters, you get a good ending.
What I've come to expect of you. You saved them.
If you kill them, you get a bad ending.
Brutality. Rapture was not enough for you. Your father was terrible.
This type of ending tries to tip the scales with regards to player behaviour. In Bioshock, regarding the gameplay, it is better to kill the little sisters as it makes you stronger. So in an attempt to counteract that, the devs added a clause in the contract where you only get the good ending if you save them, and essentially make the game harder for yourself. You can simulate this pretty easy in Unreal by creating collectibles which add 1 to a variable in your character when you collide with them. Then on another collision, either teleport the player to the good ending or the bad ending depending on these variables. In this prototype, and the prototypes going forward in the video, we are going to be substituting cutscenes which cost thousands of dollars to produce with widgets. So this is pretty binary. You either get all the collectibles and get the good ending, or you don't and you get the bad ending. But if we move on to something more dynamic, like a karma system in Infamous Second Son, where your actions affect a constantly sliding spectrum of good karma and bad karma, we can get some more dynamic results. This is another example of an ending which is to influence the player behaviour to get them to do something which is harder to do. In Infamous Second Son, it is easier to kill than to not. It's easier to do things that give you bad karma than it is to not. However, if you want the good ending, you want to get good karma and avoid bad karma. You want to put in the extra effort.
You saved me, Delson Rowe.
Hey, we're a Comish. We take care of our own, right?
Uncle Hero's back home. There's my girl. Whoa, 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 slow down. What? Come back to save the day.
The TV news showed everything. It showed everything. You have disgraced our people. You have disgraced our ancestors.
To simulate this in Unreal, I essentially did the same setup as the collectible, but instead using a float rather than an integer, essentially creating a percentage out of 100, where each collectible, which are to simulate actions, either give the player good karma or bad karma, either add or subtract from the progress bar at the top of the screen. If the player has 90% or higher good karma, they will finish the game with the blue faction, the good guys. If they have 90% or higher bad karma, they will finish the game with the red faction, which is the bad guys. However, if they fall somewhere in the middle, they belong to no faction and finish the game by themselves with a neutral ending. Next we move on to a very dynamic type of ending, an ending which the subjects of that ending can be plonked or removed depending on the player's actions throughout the game. Games like Until Dawn or The Quarry spring to mind when concerning characters being alive or dead at a game's conclusion. But the example I want to focus on is actually The Witcher 3. In The Witcher 3, there are a few side quests dotted around the map where, if the player completes them, along with choosing the right dialogue choices, that character will end up at the final battle of Kaer Morhen.
You could wait things out at Kaer Morhen.
With your friends from the School of the Wolf? No thanks. Could end badly.
Tell them I sent you. They'll understand, give you space.
Kaer Morhen, you say? Why
They're
not?
coming for Ciri. Want to take her? We'll stop them.
With The Witcher being The Witcher, this adds a lot of dynamics, gameplay and overall tone for the final hours of the game, and of course I can't really prototype to that extent. So in Unreal, to simulate a similar experience, in this room you can save none, one or both of these NPCs. If you do save them, they will appear around the corner in our simulated final cutscene. This is done simply by ticking a boolean in the player character on collision with the NPC, when I pass through the door at the end of the corridor, if those booleans are ticked, the character spawns around the corner next to the widget, which is our cutscene. Finally, we have a prototype of a type of ending which, after doing it, I realized I could have just shown the Stanley Parable.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left.
Now, games have gone a lot deeper on this type of ending, from Shadow the Hedgehog, where completing levels locks you out of other levels, to Citizen Sleeper, where relationships that the player has can open or lock paths to different endings. The long and short of it is, simply put, if the player chooses an option, some paths open, some paths close. Like a tree, once the player is on a particular branch, the only potential endings are on the branches ahead of them. They can't go back. This creates a player behavior which is often quite committal but also exploratory as well, and usually promotes replayability for the game itself. It is also, in my opinion, probably the most reflective type of ending. The choices the player makes directly result in the ending they get in a way which the player feels like they crafted that ending for themselves. Regarding the prototype, I simply just created some branching paths where once the player goes through a door, it is closed behind them, with the added twist that if they stick down the middle, the paths converge on themselves, so if the player initially chooses the left path, they can get the same decisions as the right path. This is to simulate a more morally neutral player. Once the player gets to the end, they will get one of 6 different endings based off 3 distinct choices of either left or right. However, remember at the start I was talking about how creating multiple endings can be incredibly difficult. And oftentimes it's either just one big cutscene or small change. For example, one big cutscene being Bioshock, or the little changes being The Witcher 3. Well, I wanted to take a stab at combining all the choices the player has made so far into one big ending. Imagine this is one dynamic cutscene. The final choice from the path ending is the environment, the faction chosen is the tone, the characters are the ones you've saved along the way, and whether or not you got all the collectibles is the conclusion to the story. The environment can be small yet handcrafted to match the choices the player has made along the way, such as geographical location. The faction can influence dialogue and line delivery, as well as character aesthetics. The characters themselves can add additional dialogue and context to the ending, and the story can conclude in 2 ways depending on the amount of collectibles the player has gotten. Of course, in practice, this would be incredibly costly to pull off, but for just a prototype, it works. And for me personally, I learned a lot about how different endings can be built at a basic level, and how they can influence player behavior in meaningful ways. Hopefully you learned something too. Thanks for watching, hopefully you enjoyed this episode of GDL Labs. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this, and keep on keeping on.